We acknowledge that this podcast is recorded on the unceded, ancestral, and occupied traditional territory of the Anishinabek Nation, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. And furthermore, we thank the Chippewa of Saugeen and the Chippewa of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibway Nation, who are the traditional keepers of this land. In some parts of Canada, treaties were signed with First Nations that gave incoming settlers rights to much of the land, while in other areas, few or no treaties were signed. Unceded land was never given or legally signed away to Britain or Canada. It was stolen and continues to be occupied and governed by settlers today. As we live, work, surf, and play, we say mahalo to the Métis, Inuit, and Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island and from around the world who have stewarded these lands and sacred surf spots for thousands of years. We recognize their amazing resistance, resilience, and strength in the face of ongoing dispossession, colonial violence, and injustice. In particular, we wish for justice to be brought for the murdered and missing Indigenous children and victims of Canada's residential school system. We believe that for true healing and harmony to occur, we must end the cycle of oppression while working together as we move forward in truth and reconciliation. We can be better, we can do better. Blake Meisinger, welcome to the Permastoked podcast, dude. How are you, man?
I'm great, Derik. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. I am doing great, man. It is great to have you here, dude. I realize I'm talking to a Great Lakes surfer, but I'm talking to a Great Lakes surfer in California. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of used to surf the Great Lakes, and now I'm surfing out here. So.
Wow, amazing. So I just watched a movie today called When the Waves Call. I believe it was produced in 2014. Is that correct?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were a bit younger then. It looked like you were kind of a kid living at home with mom and dad type of thing.
Yeah, I was a senior in high school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You had awesome hair, by the way. Not that your hair is bad now.
It's funny you say that. I used to actually just recently cut my hair.
Okay.
I had long hair from that point up until now. Up until like a couple weeks ago, I cut it.
Oh, wow. Your hair looks kind of red, but in the video, it was very blonde. What's your natural, man?
I think it's my mom has red hair, although I've never actually seen it maybe naturally red, but definitely red on her side. And just being out in the sun all the time, it just turns blonde.
So yeah, because you had a real like surfer mop, like traditional surfer's mop top in the video.
I think anybody who goes out in any water or any sun, it'll probably bleach, probably
That's
turn.
True. Yeah.
Light.
Unless you got nothing, man.
Well, you got the beard though.
That's true. Yeah, maybe get some blonde in the beard this summer. You're right. So, dude, tell me, kid, you are from Wisconsin, is that right?
Yep, I grew up I was born in Madison.
Okay.
I grew up in Milwaukee.
Okay, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So how far of a drive was that to the beach, your surf spot?
Well, that was close to the end of Door County. There was multiple spots in that film. Some of that's kind of a compilation footage of people that weren't like maybe credited as the filmmakers.
Oh, okay.
But that was senior year of high school, and my parents were kind enough to let me, hitch a ride with some friends up to that spot. And instead of going to school, I got to surf all day and meet the filmmakers. And there was also another day that we went up to Sheboygan, where we surfed with some GoPro kind of mounts on the board.
Yeah.
And So
So a couple of notable characters not in the film were Lee and Larry Williams. Were those ever guys you crossed paths with out in Sheboygan?
Yeah, I got to hang out with them quite a bit, and everything. They sort of stopped surfing quite as much.
Okay.
Towards the end, there was a lot more kind of like hanging out by the beach and seeing them at Dairyland and stuff like that. But I surfed quite a bit, Larry and Lee, and I noticed in one of your podcasts you mentioned their book.
Yeah, Some Like It Cold. Yeah.
That's a pretty cool book.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, Larry and Lee are super cool guys. There's a whole bunch more though that the older crew there is super cool. As with lots of Great Lake surfers, what happens is and maybe what happened to you too, is you end up on the ocean and you kind of realize, or for whatever reason, you end up back on the lakes, maybe because you realize that the ocean isn't necessarily better, like personally speaking, I surfed a lot on the Great Lakes. Like I would surf literally months every single day, where we would drive, between different spots just to get small waves.
Wow.
And yeah, it's the sort of thing where like where I live now, there's technically big waves and there's big swell, but it's been over a month since I've surfed because I don't have a car. I don't have the same connections. With COVID, it's sort of weird to share cars with people that are sort of outside of your quarantine, and so there's all different aspects of surfing. Whereas on the Great Lakes, there's kind of this, there's a like you mentioned, there's you brought up a lot of different aspects of the Great Lake surfing scene that I'll try to speak to all of them. But one of them is that there are a lot of people that, like, for example, I'm kind of one of them. I'm not on social media very much at all, except for maybe like YouTube, which isn't necessarily social media, although it is. But
it was funny when you found the podcast. It's like you found it 6 months after it had come out, but you were so stoked about it.
Yeah, that's maybe a testament to your brand or your idea kind of coming through to people that don't have direct access to a Facebook link, or because I'll type in Great Lake surfing, whatever, and your podcast and your videos came up. So
okay.
There's some other people that since I've left have gotten really into documenting it, and I think that's really great.
Yeah.
And to speak to the localism thing and the people protecting their spots and all of this, I fully respect that. I mean, the bottom line is there's waves that aren't surfed often, and there's people that, just like anywhere else that I've been, that they don't have anything else. That's what they've got, is those good waves. And it doesn't matter necessarily, like, some waves can't handle crowds, you know what I mean?
Yeah, true.
But the bottom line is, if you're willing to drive, like people will sort of throw this out when they're talking about the Great Lakes, but there's more coastline than the East and the West Coast combined,
Yep.
So if you go on Google Earth, you'll notice there's plenty of waves, so like for me, it's like I was always kind of into finding uncrowded waves. And if you happen to find someone at a good wave, that's really exciting. Like, it's kind of scary to surf alone, like one of my home breaks in Milwaukee at Atwater Beach, there's a shipwreck offshore. And when I was little, that like scared me. I was like tripped out about this shipwreck. Just for whatever reason, the idea of like a shipwreck out there was kind of scary. So even on the ocean, like, it's just nice to surf with people. So for me, like, I don't have any problem with surfing with people, but I've seen spots go from nobody and really good waves to a bunch of people that aren't necessarily, that are endangering people, so there's definitely sides to that.
Another part of the movie that's really cool, man, is just seeing how you and your dad surf together. So tell me about how you even got into surfing, man. Take us through that journey.
Well, when I was little, I was really interested in sort of like wildlife and birds and stuff like that. And my dad was very supportive of pretty much anything I was into, you know, skateboarding, skiing, like whatever it was. Both my parents were very supportive, which was awesome. And so we got a kayak and some, like, you know, 2 kayaks and a canoe. And that kind of became like we'd go out to rivers and stuff. And one time we had this idea that, because we lived right next to the Milwaukee River.
Okay.
Our boats down to the river, and we had stashed like a go-kart at the beach, and we paddled down the river, out the bay, you know, out the breakwater, and it was like there was some swell out there. You know, it was kind of scary. And the Milwaukee breakwater, it's like this big, you know, just like any breakwater, where if you tip, you're gonna get, you know, pushed into the breakwater. So it was sort of this like realization, like, oh, there's like an ocean here, you know.
Yeah.
And we ended around the water treatment plant at the beach and like walked our kayaks home, you know. So that was kind of the first time I'd ever noticed Lake Michigan.
Okay.
And we started just taking the kayaks down to the beach, hoping there was waves, like without even knowing about all of that.
Okay.
I also kind of had in the back of my mind this seed plant. My neighbor Glenn Vike, he surfed, just like from just knowing about it and living in Hawaii and stuff like that. So I kind of had this knowledge, and I had seen people at the beach surfing, so I kind of knew you could do it.
Okay.
I caught a couple waves on the kayak, just like kind of improvising with a boat.
Yeah. How old would you have been at this time?
That's a good question. I was probably like 13 or something, 14,
Okay.
maybe younger, maybe like, I don't know, like 12. And around that same time, I was in Massachusetts, where my aunt lives.
Okay.
And my dad was like, hey, we should go rent boards, try out surfing. I was like, okay. So we went down to Kennebunk, Maine, I think it's called, just some random spot on the East Coast. And I took surf lessons, but it was like very natural for me for some reason. And I was just like immediately hooked. Like that was the first time that I really stood up on a board. And then we went back to the Great Lakes, and I was definitely like, I was into skateboarding, so it was just a natural cycle of kind of, you know, I want to go surfing. And so we went up to Eos, Sheboygan, got some boards, started surfing, went down to the Third Coast Surf Shop and got some more boards. And then it was just kind of everything I thought about. I didn't have any other like real passions. I was enjoying music or whatever it was, but I was just into surfing, constantly on surf forecasts. And so it kind of went from like where I was interested in, like, you know, like I said, birds. I was just obsessed with birds and like getting up early and going for a hike, you know.
Oh, wow.
And then it became like get up early and go surf whenever I could before school, you know. And like I said, my dad was super supportive, so he would take off work sometimes, and we would go like all, like, you know, the whole entire weekend we'd be gone. So kind of became all encompassing.
Yeah. So your dad, his surfing origin story was at the same time as yours then? You guys were literally developing your skills together?
Yeah, I don't even know if he had any. I mean, basically he had surfed once in Waikiki. He had stood up.
Okay.
Like a really good swimmer, but he was on a vacation once on Oahu and got to surf once. And I think just he had a history of like with his dad, like hunting and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
So he kind of enjoyed the aspects of hunting that weren't like shooting the actual gun, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think
The downtime.
just go out in nature and surfing, as far as like something to do, it's a pretty engaging activity. I mean, it's like your whole entire life can be just looking for waves, you know?
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right though, man. It really takes over. Like, and
Yeah.
why do you think that is? Why is surfing out of everything so consuming versus like why didn't you just continue bird watching like crazy? Like why does surfing reshape everything for us?
Well, I think for me, a lot of it was like I really enjoyed jumping off of stuff,
Mm,
like slacklining, climb the highest tree, you know what I mean? Like, and I think it gives you that direct connection to something that isn't necessarily like human.
yeah.
And it's sort of like the wave, like you ever hear people say like fire qualifies for all the aspects of something that's living, You ever heard that?
No, explain.
Well, it just I can't think of all the aspects, but I've heard people say that like fire is sort of like something that's living, and like you can breathe,
Okay, yeah.
it can die, and it has its own heat and all this stuff. I
Mm,
feel like a wave is sort of a perfect, like Timothy Leary said it's the highest evolution of like human sport, and I think that's true. I mean,
mm,
there's a lot of like the actual wave itself. There's something about it visually, I think, like
yeah.
something about waves that are just so beautiful that the idea that you could get out there and get inside of a wave or swim under one, like it just
Mhm.
becomes. And then the other thing is that's really important to think about is that like um well well there's this other saying, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, which is kind of like this whole kind of idea about as you are born you pass through all the processes of evolution of the actual being, like a human being, through like the mammal phase and like through the actual fish phase.
Okay. Wow, this is getting deep, man. Holy, okay.
I feel like when you're in the water,
Mm,
you're kind of like consciously going back in the water, sort of like a whale.
mm.
Like whales used to be land animals.
Oh, I see.
This
So it's like reconnecting with some deep-rooted ancestry, and yeah,
yeah,
I
you're
got
like,
you.
it feels really good because we used to swim around.
Mm,
And then most of all, I think it's like a water slide, so it's like adrenaline, and I
mm.
like adrenaline. Anything that mountain biking, like skiing, snowboarding, anything like that, I think people will spend their whole lives looking for that.
I like this notion you brought up, though, Blake. It's not that people are discovering waves in water, it's that people are actually reconnecting with
Yeah.
waves in water. You're right. This was something that traditionally we would have been, much more dependent on the seas and the waves and weather patterns. And in our modern day age, one can go their entire life without even seeing a body of water fairly without consequence. So yeah, that is I really like that, man.
It's just you against I mean, people always say it's like, I mean, I've come close to essentially dying surfing.
Mm,
No one's gonna save you. You know what I mean? Like
mm,
you're out there. It's like like I've gotten really into music lately, and that's what I went to school for. And if you fall with music, it's like socially awkward, or it sounds wrong, or whatever. But with
oh,
surfing,
like if you fumble the chords or something. Okay, yep.
it's kind of like it's like this dance with danger. It's like free
Mm,
climbing or something. There's this other aspect where you're kind of accepting when you go out that you might not come in. Especially
mm,
with big waves, especially on the Great Lakes when it's blowing. The Great Lakes, I think people underestimate them, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing as
yeah.
the and the other thing is that people have been shredding. People have been getting barreled for a long time. And I think
Mm,
people kind of like or emphasize like modern performance surfing.
mm,
But really, like, people have been getting inside the wave and all that stuff for a long time. I mean, there's just
mm,
not any proof of it, but that's
yeah.
been people have done, so.
Yeah, and not necessarily in a traditional surfboard, but some type of surfing craft for sure.
Yeah, or just body surfing too,
Yeah. So I find it really fascinating at the end of When the Waves Will Call. They're sort of asking you, Blake, so are you going to be on the Great Lakes forever type of a thing? And you very, very freely say, well, I don't know, there's California and there's these other places with consistent waves. And I find that really interesting that you said that, because yeah, you're right. You brought up a few minutes ago about myself and coming back to the lakes, and you're right. So many people have went to the ocean expecting, surfing every day, riding the big waves, and then kind of reality sets in that there are these barriers. In your case, it's, lack of transportation. In my case, it was living on the mainland in BC. It's quite a costly endeavor to go to the island and take the ferries and all these kind of things. So one does kind of get drawn back to the Great Lakes, I think, in terms of some of it has to do, I think, with the simplicity of it. The ability to even park your car at the beach. I mean, this is something that even in California is really difficult to do, right? But as well as I do, in the Great Lakes, there are some spots that there's literally nobody there except you. So I think that there are some very special, unique gifts from the Great Lakes that I think maybe go unappreciated sometimes.
I think, do you mind if I respond to that?
Yeah, no, dude.
I think the main thing about the Great Lakes is that I was lucky enough to discover surfing.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't, every aspect of surfing I got to like discover, like, oh, there's different boards, different waves, like everything was miniaturized and kind of, like on the ocean, when people sort of like discovered surfing and it became mainstream in the 60s or in the 70s or the 50s or whatever, big boom, because it was so like you could go to the beach, you could wear trunks, Beach Boys, all of this kind of thing. But the sort of hardcoreness or the intensity of the Great Lakes is really good at kind of keeping that down, So you'll end up hanging out with the weirdest people, and that's fun. I've been to the East Coast pretty extensively, the West Coast, all over California and Oahu, and I've talked to a lot of surfers. They're a lot more surfers. They're a lot less just, they're kind of trying to hold up this idea of like being cool, or like being a surfer or having the right board or the right brands, and I feel like the Great Lakes, they kind of like, they have a lot of that. But I was able to find the people that would drive and that you could get rides with, go to Lake Superior, whatever it was, were like pretty cool. Like there's this aspect of like, lawyers, doctors, professional ex-wrestlers, truckers, just people, just regular old people. So it's sort of like, there was just more like camaraderie, whereas here there's a little bit more like people kind of like don't necessarily talk as much,
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, I had Kevin Schultz on the show not long ago, and he was kind of comparing that as well and telling me about, sort of what a day out on the ocean looks like compared to his Great Lakes experience, for sure. Now, you started surfing at a young age, and I mean, those videos, man, like you're ripping it. And I think what excites me about watching you, knowing that you came into the sport around 13 or something, I was around 18, 19, which is a difference. So seeing the skill level that you built up in those early years, you're really, small guy, you're lean, so physically not that challenging, and you're going to take that with you the rest of your life. So I feel like you sort of got to propel yourself forward in surfing more so than a lot of us have, because we sort of discovered it when we were a bit older.
Yeah, I was really lucky. I was also there for the good wetsuits, the good
Mm,
surf shops. I had ding repair. I was there for the lower crowds and really high culture, and you still had all the old guys. So I felt extremely lucky, and I still do.
yeah. Hmm. So when you go back home, I take it your family is in Sheboygan, correct? Or Milwaukee or
Um, my sister lives in Milwaukee, and my parents did some moving around, and now they live
okay. Where do they live?
in Connecticut.
Oh, okay. So wow, so you're not going back to the Great Lakes then on your visits, I take it.
Um, actually, it's so weird because my dad kind of has this knack for moving around jobs quite a bit.
Oh, okay.
So last time my parents, it was in Milwaukee, and I got to
Mm.
surf. And the time before that, they were living in Muskegon, and I got to
Oh, okay.
surf Chicago. So every time I've gotten lucky. But yeah, they just moved right when COVID hit. They moved to
Okay.
Connecticut. So
Nice.
haven't seen them
So
since.
how long you been in university out in California?
2014, I graduated, and then I took a year off, and then I went to school for 5 years. So been
Oh,
out
wow.
6 years.
Okay. So you've been away for a little bit. So when you do get back to the Great Lakes, what are some of the things that maybe you either forgot about or are different now, or what are some of the things you're coming up against? Because you mentioned that it almost sounds like when you got into surfing, it was like kind of this very special time.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what has changed? What's so different about it now if someone were to get into it?
Well, I honestly wouldn't know because I haven't spent a whole lot of time there.
Oh,
But
okay.
I can tell just through like some research that it's gotten a little bit more popular.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think probably the biggest thing that I've seen and just researched about is the lake levels changing,
Mm, yeah.
which I don't know. I mean, that's going to open up spots and kill others.
Yeah.
But I honestly think the lake levels might be the biggest deal. And I think
Mm,
if the Great Lakes don't get totally screwed over, like there's like cadmium and stuff being dumped, the
mm,
south end, there's like a oil pipeline under the Mackinac Bridge that's I think long overdue to be replaced.
mm,
I think the culture itself, it just had when I was there, it had surfing old people, like
mm.
people that had been there since the 50s.
Yeah.
And I guess it just feels like there's a little bit more high performance, a little bit
Mm.
better editing. There's a podcast, so it's becoming more mainstream, like Weird Waves. I actually got to go to the premiere in Chicago last
Of
time that
Dylan Graves video?
yeah.
Yeah.
And like that was like a mainstream event, whereas
Wow.
like up until now it's been surfers on the Great Lakes kind of trying to get recognition.
Yeah, we did kind of get into this at a very special place in time. I guess before the boom, right? I still am not convinced that the boom is here
Hmm.
in Canada, anyhow. Um, but it's definitely grown. No doubt about it. You're right. I've got this podcast going, but aside from this podcast, you're right, man. People are pumping out some high quality videos, films. Like it is just next level. And it's literally what brought me back, man. I mean, really, I was just out on the West Coast like you are, trying to get my surf in here and there. And I'm watching the internet and I'm like, I can't believe what's happening back there. Like there's surf shops opening up on the Great Lakes. Like my first wetsuit, man, was a diving suit.
Yeah,
The first time I got my board repaired, I had to take it to a
I
a
heard.
sailboat shop. Yeah, and it costs like $700. Like like just absolute craziness that doesn't exist today. Like you could get the board fixed for way cheaper than that now at a real surf shop. So it is really cool though, man. I think I'm not saying like we are legends or anything like that, but it is pretty neat, man, to think back. Like when you're an old man, you'd be sitting there with your grandkids and you can talk about the very early days still of Great Lakes surfing. I do think you will have that right and privilege, man, because you were there putting in the hours and carving out a place in history for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing where if you show up and you put in your work, you're not necessarily a legend, but people will give you the time of day. They'll pitch on gas. Everyone's willing to tell you where all the good spots are if you just show them some love or whatever. And it's really
Yeah.
like being out there. Like you're going to be forgotten if, like I don't have any authority on Great Lakes waves. I don't know anything about the spots anymore. I don't know anything about people, but if I was to go back, then I could just slip right back in, and that's great, because
That's what I did. So you'd be welcomed right back because that's what I got. Yeah.
There's not necessarily the kind of pecking order that you find in like really localized ocean waves. I mean, there are to certain waves on the Great Lakes are just like the ocean.
Yeah.
But it's like I said, it's kind of there's always going to be spots you can go and surf by yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
Well, when you were talking about, folks living in California, for example, versus the Great Lakes, I mean, yeah, you brought up the fact that surfing on the East and West Coast is fairly normative behavior. It's like being Canadian and playing hockey, or being American and playing baseball or football. It's pretty standard, nothing too out of the ordinary. Whereas, people on the Great Lakes getting into their 6 mil wetsuits in the middle of winter and it's snowing and blowing, these people are genuinely, in the best way possible, sort of misfits, kind of looking for what is it that fills their cup. And for so many of us, it's surfing. And we can't get to the ocean. So we take the Great Lakes, and it's wonderful. So I do agree with you there. And I think there's just this sense of stoke and appreciation amongst each other, because for the longest time, people hadn't really thought that they'd even be able to do this. So.
Yeah, I think that's a big aspect of it. It's just the idea that you're like, a lot of people don't know you can surf the lakes, and they're on a walk one day and they're like, these waves are surfable. And it's this feeling, it's sort of like a dream, it's like this doesn't seem real. And then you get into it and you realize that the waves are actually really good. And I think the thing that hasn't been maybe properly documented on lakes is like some of the waves are just extremely beautiful and different. That like the shorter interval, the way that the wind is, totally different than anywhere else I've been. And it's like it like, I don't want to say that it's like mostly novelty, but there's this weird aspect to it that is like hilarious, and it kind of feels like you're in somewhat of like a dream, or you're not supposed to be doing it because you're surfing off of icebergs, or you're swimming in ice caves, and it's like, this doesn't make sense, but we're doing it, So that's my favorite part, is just that feeling that you mentioned, where it's like, this isn't like, I felt really lucky that, like, everyone says this, but I kind of made a California surfing culture amongst my friends, all this stuff in Milwaukee, and it's like, you realize things that you can kind of do whatever you want to do.
I totally hear you, man. When I was in high school, it might as well have been Southern California, the way my mentality was. I really was into all that. And yeah, just like yourself, sort of a duck out of water, or fish out of water in a way. So, hey, man, sorry, go ahead.
You were saying when you were young, that you were pretty much by yourself with, as far as the culture, you were kind of on your own?
Pretty much. I got introduced by another local guy, and I got my first board from him, who he had gotten through Paul and Dean. So I would be out there with him, when he was out. But I remember he moved away fairly early into me getting into it. And I had another friend, and he didn't know how to swim. So he was kind of there sometimes, not other times. My other good buddy, but I was pretty much the regular at that point in time, and I put most of my hours in by myself. And yeah, man, that's why I feel like 20 years later, I'm still really learning, because now I'm in a point where I am surfing amongst way more people than I ever have before. So now it's like I'm looking around, I'm watching people who got into surfing like last year, and seeing what they're doing, and it's just incredible. It's blowing my mind. Being 6'4", 210 pounds to 220 sometimes, I never thought about shortboards. It was, I'm on a longboard. That's just the way surfing is on the Great Lakes. Man, I can't believe it. Like, people are rocking everything these days. People are ripping it up on shortboards, and it's really like no limits now.
Did you grow up where you are now?
No, I'm living about 4 hours northwest. I grew up very close to Detroit, so about a 40-minute drive from the border. So, and probably about an hour or so boat ride across the lake from Toledo. So I had Michigan on one side, Ohio on the other. Now I'm living up not too far from this place called Kincardine, which is a really good break up here, but I'm on Lake Huron now.
Are you on like Georgian Bay or Gorgian Bay or whatever?
Yeah, Georgian Bay is to the east of me. So where I live in Owen Sound, I'm sort of an equal drive. I can either get to the coast of Lake Huron, or I can go up on Georgian Bay. So both have their waves from different wind directions. So that's actually helped quite a bit, because when I was living in Leamington, I had to rely on those southwest winds. Was pretty much the only time I got waves. Now that I'm out here, it's a little more central. So if I want to go out to Lake Ontario, hang with some buddies in Toronto, that's only a 2-hour drive. Lake Erie, maybe 3 hours. So there's definitely more maneuverability for me these days. Plus, man, back then, I didn't know anybody. I wouldn't have known where to go. The internet was definitely not what it is today. So the internet has blown this wide open.
Yeah.
There
was a forum that I think is discontinued, but it was the Third Coast Surf Shop forum.
Mm.
And that was a source for some drama. It was insane. Like, it's just whatever you were mentioning earlier about people getting angry, there is some of that, man. It's crazy.
Okay.
But do you ever go to, so you're southwest, so do you ever go to Lake Superior?
I've never been surfing on Lake Superior yet. I went to Lake Superior for the very first time this summer driving here, and I took out my paddleboard. That was pretty awesome. What a majestic lake that was up in northern Ontario. But dude, I can't wait to ride those waves up there for sure.
Yeah, it's different up there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, people are shredding on the Great Lakes.
Mm.
I think it's still kind of set up for sort of like nose riding, longer points. Like if you get like a big 10-foot swell,
yeah,
you can find a waist high point, and that's what I would always look for, is like try to go longboarding. So I shied away from shortboarding, but I would still do a lot of it. But I think there's a lot of really good longboard waves, and there's not so many good shortboard waves, and you'll just catch less waves on a shortboard.
Yeah.
So that was always my thing, is just longboard unless it's like insane,
Well, when I first got here, I went to the Kincardine break for the very first time, and it was still sort of summertime, just coming into fall. So we weren't in, some people were in wetsuits, others weren't. I wasn't, I was in board shorts. And I remember there had to have been at least 40 people out there. And I couldn't believe it, because like I said, I'd been out with 4 people at the max before.
Yeah.
So there's like 40 people out there at the break, I'm thinking. And dude, I didn't see a longboard in sight. They were all those, pointed ends sticking out. But here's the thing, you're right. Not everyone was catching waves. Most people were just kind of sitting out there. And the people who were riding really stood out. But I'll tell you, man, I felt like a 90-year-old man sitting out there on my 10-foot longboard. Like I felt like I stood out big time.
Well, you probably did, but that's like that's what that's what you want, like I don't let that or I basically people look at shortboarding as cooler, or like more this.
Yeah.
I just tried to nose ride, and you're gonna catch more waves. I mean, how much surfing is standing up? It's gonna increase if you ride a longer board. And then like the thing is, like when it's a big day, like a really big day, you're gonna want a big board. So it's like I've always just gone because you're gonna spend a lot of time paddling. Like I just go with a longer board, but
absolutely, yeah.
It's fun to kind of skate on the water too, But yeah, that's easy to hear 40 people. I never went to Lake Huron or anything up there, so
yeah, that's the most I've ever seen. But this place called Kincardine, it's gotten a lot of attention. It's got a really nice break there. Really, really great spot. Yeah, honestly, when I went surfing there for the first time earlier this year or last year, the waves coming in, man, no joke. I was looking at these waves and I was thinking, these are some of the biggest waves I've ever seen. Like, and even with the ocean, like I was that blown away. Like they were that significantly bigger than anything I'd ever surfed back home in Leamington. Just incredible, man. Yeah. So, hey, you've talked a little bit about music, man. So tell me about your degree and what are you doing out there in California? I mean, music, California, come on. That sounds like the dream right there, man.
So I decided I would go to school. I went surfing for about a year after high school. I just surfed a lot, and then I kind of realized my parents like wanted me to go to school, and they were willing to pay for my college.
Yeah.
Pretty big deal. Like if
someone, that makes a difference.
So I came here and I went to Humboldt State University, and my first degree was outdoor recreation.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
It's kind of like I had this theory I could take people on like kayaking trips or like backpacking or whatever,
Yeah.
And it was awful. I really didn't enjoy. I didn't like anything about it,
Really? Wow. Okay.
And I had this experience. I was just wandering around and I walked into the theater on campus, which turns out, we have a lot of good people come through this area because people who are going from San Francisco to Portland or whatever. I've gotten to see a lot of good music here, but it was the Humboldt State Calypso Band, which is a steel band, like steel pans.
Okay.
And I just walked in there and just had kind of blew my mind. All these people with sticks hitting metal trash cans, essentially.
Oh.
This is like amazing, because I've always had kind of a knack for picking up different instruments, which might have had to do with I was forced, sort of willingly forced into piano lessons when I was little.
Okay.
And one thing led to another, and I ended up joining the band, and I just realized, like, man, I could just do this instead. So I switched over to guitar at first, and the guitar professor was just not that great, and ended up actually quitting.
Oh, okay.
Fired, I don't know. But it all kind of like fate and everything led me, or whatever it was, to this one group, which is the percussion department, and this guy Eugene Novotny and Howie Kaufman. These just two like really like kind of I would consider overqualified teachers for this area. Like it's kind of a hard to get to place, and it's like pretty expensive to fly here. So I don't really know how they ended up here, but I ended up in this kind of situation where I realized like that I have strengths in catching waves, and like I can catch a lot of waves surfing for a long time, but there's a selfish aspect to that, and it was serving me and it was fun, but I was seeing this other thing I could do, which is like, using music to kind of like make myself happy and make other people happy.
Yeah.
I discovered that I'm pretty good at memorizing music,
Okay.
I'm not so good at reading it. Like I can read it and stuff, but I'm like pretty good at memorizing it.
Okay.
I just did that for like 3 years and it was extremely fun. Really like perfect thing for me. It kind of kept my brain busy and like my room's full of instruments. I
Now,
play a lot
did you say like a brass band, like big band music?
in Trinidad and Tobago down in the Caribbean.
Okay.
In like the 60s or the 50s or something, there was all these oil barrels from like whatever war or something happened where there was just all these oil barrels, and the people there like figured out that you can take a hammer and hammer out the bottom of these barrels to make instruments, steel
Okay.
or steel drums. People call them steel.
Yeah, yeah.
And they like it's a modern art form. The people that started it are still living, and I got to meet some like original composers, because the guy here, Eugene, he would go to Trinidad, or did, and play in those actual panorama competitions where it's like kind of like war, where it's like these bands play and everyone kind of votes on them, and it's this whole big thing.
Like a battle.
Like a battle, yeah. So he had like a really strong connection to that actual culture and not just the music. So he was like he arranges music, brings it here, and it's the perfect kind of way to teach music because it's just sticks. There's no like bending, there's no like real fine motor skills. And once you get into it, there's finesse and there's all kinds of technique. But you just hit it and it makes a sound, Yeah. So I'm
curious because I'm a drummer. That sounds like fun.
You would love it. It's basically like, think like orchestra. It's an orchestra, a steel pan orchestra. Basically, it has the tenor. It has everything a regular band would have, and you play all kinds of music. So, and I had never heard of that really.
Wow, yeah, let's check that out. So that's what you got into. So where has that taken you? How have you continued that music?
That's a good question. Well, at the end of my schooling, everything went online. I have so much sympathy or whatever it is for all those people that are doing school online now. Like, I got out right at the end and I was angry, like that made me mad. But if I had to continue that, I definitely would have dropped out. I mean, I almost dropped out before I became a percussion major, but I would definitely have dropped out if I had to do it online. So after that,
you're not in that space with the people feeling the music anymore.
Yeah. It's a terrible thing to do. So I have a steel pan, I have tons of instruments, and I play music every day. I've been playing a lot of like synthesizer, just like fiddling around, but music is definitely supposed to be shared, Yeah. And I try to do live streams. I try to like share tracks with friends, and that's how I try to keep it going. But whenever I get vaccinated or whenever I become comfortable with going back to school, I'm just going to continue with those same people, or just continue whatever I was doing with new people.
Yeah. So are you looking to be a music producer or a songwriter or performer?
I like performing. I mean, I consider podcast composition. I mean, this is audio, this is medium. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I do want to do all those things,
Amazing. Yeah.
And I all those things. But performing, I haven't performed in front of bodies for over a year,
Yeah. Hey, if you got some music, feel free to send it to me. I can attach it to the podcast. That'd be pretty cool.
Cool.
Yeah, I've done that for some other people too. So right on, man. So Now, when you are composing music or creating music, do you ever put some of that surf flavor in there? Do you have any influence from your shredding the waves? Does that go into your songwriting?
It's a good question. Probably on accident in some way. I have an interest in recording sounds. So like one of the
Mm,
things I really want to do, and I haven't succeeded, but I would love to record waves, you know. No one's ever
yeah.
really done that, you know. I mean, there is a little bit, but most of it's GoPro sound. Like imagine if you could hear a high quality of inside the barrel, you know, like I don't know, I feel
Yeah.
like that's fun, but I haven't gotten to do that.
As music. Wow, that's a great idea.
I've had this idea for a while. I can't say I've done what you're asking, but I have ideas. Something else I want to do is like I think you could do some really interesting stuff with syncing, sort of like dancing on a wave, you know, which is actually a
Yeah.
stupid song.
Mm,
um, but yeah, the idea would be like you know, like with some waterproof earphones,
mhm.
surf to like a percussion piece percussively.
Wow.
No one's done that really.
No, you need to start like an underwater orchestra, man.
That's a great idea. I mean, to people with scuba suits. Actually, sound travels underwater better, so it would work, you know?
Right on. Yeah. Be a little tricky to hit the toms underwater, but hey, might as well try. Oh, well, I was going to ask you something else about that. I'm kind of slipping my
Can I
mind here.
ask you a question?
Yeah, man, what's up?
I noticed your earliest video is at Yuck Yucks,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
comedy routine. And
That's
I'm a big
right. Yeah.
fan of. Wondered if you do that still, or if that was a one-time gig.
That was a one-time thing, but that doesn't mean it ends there. I had taken a course in Vancouver, a stand-up comedy course, and so we developed our sets and then we performed them. I'll tell you, man, I can't watch that video without cringing though. Like when I performed, everyone was laughing their butts off. When I practiced week after week, everybody in the class told me you're one of the funniest people. Like I had a lot of confidence, but when I watched that video, I'm like, I don't really see what was so funny anymore. But so much of comedy is in the moment and it's feeling the energy in the room. Very similar to music, actually.
Yeah, yeah, I think
Yeah.
about that
And yeah, stand-up comedy, I absolutely love it. I'm always writing jokes, but it's just a matter of when you have enough material, putting it together and actually doing something with it. So yeah, I do plan to be back. I appreciate that. Was my set okay or?
a lot. I loved it. I thought it was great.
Oh,
It
okay, great.
sounded like I practiced it, and it sounded like comedy. Like you were stringing it all together, and you were improvising a little bit. It was cool.
Yeah, yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, I've been watching a lot of roast battle recently,
Oh,
hosted by Jeff Ross. Yeah, I really like that. I would love to try that out sometime.
that's cool. Yeah, roasts are funny.
Yeah.
That's where Tom Green started at, I think. Yuck Yucks.
Oh, yeah, that's probably right. Yeah. Tom Green, one of our Canadian guys.
Yep.
I remember watching those videos when I was in high school, and he was really crazy. He'd like go into a department store and take over the intercoms, and yeah. So Great Lakes surfer out in California, man, but you're only surfing like once a month, you said.
Yeah, I was going quite a bit. Um, just in general when I was going to school and stuff, I would go here and there.
Mhm.
But the thing about school, and I never wanted it to be this way, but it's like a full-time thing, you know?
Yeah.
Got out of the habit of it. And recently not having a car and then just not having access to people that are like, you know, within the my personal quarantine, I
Yeah.
haven't much. And the other thing is like for me to get to the beach, it's like maybe like 20-minute drive.
Mm.
Because like if I was to go straight to the beach, it's just like a straight beach, you know. There's
Mm.
really no waves there or like no break, you know.
Oh, okay.
But it's cool because when I actually get the time to go and which I do, it's a super beautiful beach,
Yeah.
and it's kind of more like the Northern Great Lakes with big rocks and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, music has taken over. I mean, I'm unhappy with the amount that I surf, but now that I'm graduated and stuff like that, I feel like there's definitely a lot more time for it, which is cool. But things change and then they change again. So
Yeah, that's great, man. I'm watching you here. You look passionate. You look like you found your purpose right now, man. That's a great feeling. Hang on to that.
yeah.
Harness that as long as you can. Yeah, I'm really curious to see where it takes you, dude. Um, you're reminding me of, I watched a movie not too long ago. It was called Love and Mercy. It was the
Okay.
story of Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys.
Okay, yeah.
And there was a scene in there where it showed the musical genius that went into the production of Good Vibrations. And I think you would appreciate that. You should look that up because there's all these different sort of random and very obscure props and whatnot that he uses to create the sounds for that. It
Mm-hmm.
really makes you appreciate that song. I mean, that song went from being awesome for me to epic after watching that movie and just seeing his creative genius that went into that. Pretty cool stuff.
What's the film called again?
It's called Love and Mercy.
Okay, I got it. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
look at a whole list of movies. So
Yeah, man. So I know you got a pretty full plate with surfing and with music. You brought up some bird watching and stuff earlier, but I do like to ask people, what other kind of things keep you stoked?
it's a good question. I'm really into visual art too. I've been really into that lately, and just kind of figuring out a way to, basically like cheap mediums, inexpensive ways to just get ideas out. Um, Stuff like that. Anything like that is something I like. I like to write. I like to draw. Um, I'm really kind of passionate, and I wouldn't say necessarily stoked, but I think it's really important that as a species, we take the time to kind of not like just think about ourselves, and like it's one of those things where like, you hear the news and everything's going crazy, you look outside and it's like, well, it looks like a normal day, and it's like, I haven't gotten sick, like what's going on here? And I
Yeah.
think it's kind of up to all of us to actually go out into the world and like try to make it a better place,
I
and like
agree.
environmentally, like I'm kind of bothered by just like the wildfires, the like I moved out here thinking it would be this pristine redwood area.
Yeah.
Pretty gone. Like there's
Wow.
substantial trees, but it's like 98% gone, and that's kind of sad.
Wow. Yeah.
And I've spent a lot of time just like driving around. Like when I was young, my parents let me go on some drives. Like I drove to the West Coast twice. And
Wow.
you kind of realize like if you go out in the middle of nowhere, it's still just cows and wind farms and oil refineries. And like I don't know, I guess that's something that I feel like maybe is something that I kind of want to get into, is figuring out a way, maybe through music or whatever it is, but just kind of like getting people to realize that these things are actually happening,
Yeah.
like let's just say hypothetically that the overdue pipeline under the Mackinac Bridge broke, that would be like kind of a problem for surfing, and it would be a
Yeah.
problem for the.
Detrimental.
So like I feel like that's something that I kind of want to work into my art, and just like figure out a way to like get that message across to people,
Yeah.
whatever I just said.
There's a lot of people asleep at the wheel, man.
Yeah.
So it's great to hear you have that drive and motivation to get the message out there. I think it's more important than ever. Over the weekend, it was Easter weekend, and I was at my aunt's house, and she doesn't recycle. And she was, I'm thinking like, wow, who doesn't recycle? But she does. doesn't recycle, and she was throwing her bottle in the garbage. And meanwhile, the whole weekend she'd been talking about her grandson. And so I said, you know, you're not recycling. Like, are you really thinking about your grandson? Are you really thinking about the future, you know, in those little decisions? It's so out of sight, out of mind for so many people. But we're definitely at a sort of a threshold now where people are waking up and realizing we can't continue this way. We're just going to use everything up. It's not going to be left.
Yeah, and it sort of feels like it's too late, you know, and like I sympathize with your grandma. Like I understand that mentality. Like even the platforms that podcasts are on, central heating, you know, internal
Yeah.
engines, like all this stuff that everyone uses. You know, my whole room is synthetic. Our clothing is toxic. Like these things are, it's so systemic that it's
You're
almost
right.
what I like to do is like kind of thought experiment. Like, well, what if recycling isn't working? If the billboards aren't working, like what is it that, because there's got to be something, you know what I mean? Like it, maybe it's music, maybe it's comedy, maybe it's innovation of technology.
Yep.
I just, you know, that's like a, it's kind of like if you're a problem solver, there's got to be something that can be done, because the alternative is kind of grim, that there's nothing you can do, you know.
Yeah, no, for sure. You're right. Art plays a role in this stuff. You're gonna like some upcoming interviews I have. I have a few interviews. One's with the guy, the president of Swim Drink Fish Canada. I do another one with a Lily Woodbury from Surfrider. And some of the things that I dissected from what they were saying to me was, first of all, in order for people to take an interest in the environment, they have to have an investment in it. So they have to be connected to it. And that's what's great about surfing, you'll notice, is that people who surf typically become very environmentally minded as well, because they care. If they don't have that lake, their passion's over. So they, because of that connection, it drives them to preserve that. So that's sort of like step one. And then when I talk to Lily, she really brings it home about the fact that, kind of like what you were saying, like industry plays such a big part, and we've taken on this responsibility, but there's so much going on all the time, like you're saying, just in this very room.
Yeah.
That what are we doing about that? And we're all just kind of playing into it by being in our rooms right now, by doing these things. So how can we stand out in those things that we're doing and maybe minimize the effects of them? It's all good thought, man. Good stuff to think about. I don't know the answer either.
If the truth is said, so it is to be understood, it will be believed.
Okay. That one was over my head, but I'll take your word for it.
You know, it's like Tom Green, you know, he's this crazy guy, right?
Yeah.
Got this modern like take on reality where he just goes around and lives in a van. I'm not sure if you've seen these videos or not.
I didn't know he's doing that recently. No.
And he's going to all these places that like a lot of people haven't heard of. And in the comments, they're like, you're exposing this spot, you know, and it's like blah blah. It's like, dude, this is literally, if you know, look up a lot of these spots, there's laws in place to like the tiny border they're going to put it over now, and all these places I could list they're trying to get rid of. So maybe the publicizing of, you know, national parks, BLM land, or Great Lakes surf spots, maybe it's kind of like, maybe there's an aspect of it that actually is helping a lot. You know, people get out there and they realize, oh, this is worth saving, you know? So
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I don't disagree with that. That makes a lot of sense, man, for sure. So, dude, you're a really insightful, smart guy, surfer, musician, lots going on in that head of yours, man. I'm real curious. You brought up a few things. What are you reading or watching, or listening to these days?
Well, I really like stand-up comedy. I honestly believe that I'm more set up for music, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but um, like I listen to a lot. I was just listening to Bill Hicks. I love Bill Hicks.
Okay.
Um, I listen to. There's a podcast, Comes a Time. It's like a Grateful Dead kind of. It's with O'Teal, this guy, and this guy Mike, stand-up comedian.
Okay.
The basis for Dead and Co. They have some good sort of modern podcasts.
Break this down for me. You brought up the Grateful Dead. I hope I don't take any flack for this. What is the appeal with the Grateful Dead? I've tried listening to their music. None of the songs I've heard, like if I listen to their greatest hits album, I mean, these are not really songs that you're hearing on classic rock stations. So I feel like they are a bit obscure and outside of the traditional realm of that era of music. So what is the deal with the Grateful Dead? They seem to have this cult following.
Well, that question is a lot of podcasts worth of material.
Really? Okay.
I don't claim to be an expert or have the data, but the Grateful Dead are basically, or were, because, well, here's the thing, it's like the Grateful Dead. I mean, this is the thing. It's like it's a whole bunch of stuff, But the Grateful Dead, the actual word, it's like an old folk tale.
Okay.
And there's Buddhist, kind of like Zen interpretations of it too. But this folk tale is the idea that a guy finds a dead guy and he buries him. And then he's grateful, like he is eternally grateful. Maybe he like grants him a wish or something. It's like some kind of folk tale, So that's
okay.
That's the history of it. And the Grateful Dead in many ways are dead. I mean, they are, like Jerry Garcia was a musician and he was kind of a philosopher, but he was sort of like, in some ways, almost a cult leader. And he didn't want that and ended up in the end being his demise, that he basically had all this pressure. People were like, Jerry is God and all of this. But they aren't necessarily dead because there is modern touring, which is kind of a strange phenomenon. I don't know if I support it, but in the end, like I'm sure Jerry's grateful because they're singing his songs and all of this, and he is dead. But what it really is it's the resurgence of an ancient sort of psychedelic ritual kind of cult of like nomadism and free economy. And it's hard to get an image of what it is because it's not like we aren't seeing it. Like when you play a greatest hits, that's what you're getting. They equate to the studio very well. What they're all about, and what I'm all about too, live improvisation. Bill Hicks says your routine is what you do when you have nothing to say, right? So it's this idea where we're going to go on stage, and instead of just sending the routine every time the same and being like, I'm a comedian, what they're going to do is we're going to play it fast tonight. We're going to play it this way, but they don't ever talk about it. So they would just get on stage and just play. And like maybe one person would be in charge of the like what songs next.
Okay.
So about the live show. And my best recommendation would be listen to a live show. But it's kind of hard to understand. And I would say just in the position I'm in, I feel like I've been lucky to get a little bit of a glimpse at what it is.
Okay.
But it's like I don't know if you've heard of the rainbow gatherings. Have you ever heard of that?
No, don't know what that is.
The rainbow gatherings are a bunch of people throughout the world, all over the world they do it. And it's supposed to be a Hopi prophecy where at the end of the world, when all these things happen that are happening now, this group of people from all walks of life and all different colors and stuff will come together and peacefully assemble, basically.
Yep.
And I think that's the extension of the Grateful Dead philosophy. So that's kind of a modern version of it. It's just people going into national park land that, humans own. It's like it's owned by the public. And it gets bad. There's a lot of like, if you look at the Grateful Dead culture, a lot of it's kind of, there's a lot of drug use. There's a lot.
Well, that's what I was going to say. what comes to mind is all the little teddy bears and basically like doing mushrooms and having some kind of psychedelic experience, right? But what you're telling me is really outside of that. You're telling me some very attractive philosophies that I already buy into mostly. So it sounds like that the what's underneath the music is really where it's at with them.
Well, and like you said, people focus on the drugs, but it's
Mm-hmm.
underneath the drugs. And what it is that music, like, I'll end up getting on all these tangents, but like I have someone's PhD over here. It's like there's very little science on it, but music puts your brain into a different resonance, literally, not like figuratively, like some mumbo jumbo, like, oh, like music makes you high, but it literally is the way that people practiced religion for thousands of years. Is they would get together, they would freak out on music over a fire or the full moon or whatever it is, and the Grateful Dead. And then a lot of those people a long time ago, people aren't supposed to be in one spot. A lot of people go crazy when they're stuck in one spot, and it feels good to like move. And like basically what happened is human beings got a surplus of food and they're like, we should stay here all winter this year. And then you have a surplus of food, you got to defend it. You have class system now, you have weapons. So like it was this idea of like, we're just gonna move around,
Nomadic, ceremonial. I love it. Yeah.
And like to bring it all back around, that's what I like about surfing, is that you can just go. I mean, like I said, I had this crazy month or two where my dad and I like, and he actually has logs of all of our surf trips, but I surfed like, I think I want to say like 50 days in a row, 60 days in a row.
Wow.
We were just driving around, I surfed Green Bay.
Wow.
It feels good to just keep going. And I feel like modern day, it's really hard to do that. It's really, so it's kind of a nostalgia thing. And I hope it is, hope that it comes back some way.
We could go off in tangents, man. I've been having a lot of thoughts lately about how, why do we work so much? And basically, it's like we've created the demand for us to work so much. It's like, what if we just needed less? Then wouldn't we have more time to chill and just really enjoy this whole thing called life? I'm just really, I don't know. I'm at a point in my life where I'm really, it's like, okay, I still got a lot of this left. What do I want to do differently? Because some of this ain't working,
Yeah. Well, Humboldt County is really, really good for just growing all kinds of plants. And that's something that I didn't anticipate moving here, was like organic farming. I think it's the largest farmers market is in Arcata in California. Wow. And so I kind of like just found myself here, and there's all these great resources, and I got employed by someone to farm strawberries.
Yep.
Kind of like found myself every summer just like biking out to this property or getting a ride and just picking strawberries for hours on end. And it's like, we're all looking for this solution, and it's like work, money. But if you farm strawberries, the work is the strawberries, or that is the payoff. You're seeing the work directly in your hand,
Yeah.
Like, I can pick this row in this amount of time, and it's like your brain starts working like sort of in a different pathway. Whereas, it's like, if I heard someone say this recently, if you have a Kindle, you have the whole work of Shakespeare on there, right? But if you have a book, it's like you can feel it, you can open it and close it, and that's it, So that's what I've learned, is like, what we need is food, quality food, shelter, good water, clean air. Those are really, really hard to find. It's surprising.
Yeah.
Everyone's overlooking the main things that we need.
And those are the basics. Yeah.
Basics. So that's my goal, and it's not necessarily working, but that's I'm trying to go,
Get back to basics. I love it.
There.
All right, man. Well, hey, one day you and me, we're going to have to go on like a nomadic hippie camping trip.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get a car like within the next month or next couple weeks, and I plan to definitely drive out to see my parents, and I'll stop through for sure. That'd be cool. I've got a passport, so I can come through.
Have you been to Canada before?
I think I drove through it when I was too young to remember, but no, I haven't.
Oh, you gotta get over here in Canada. Well, I don't think our border's quite open yet, but maybe by the time you get the car and there'll be more vaccines rolled out by then. Yeah, man, I'd love to see you over here. We can go surf in the Great White North, which really isn't any further north than you're used to, actually.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I probably won't see you in the next year, but if I do, that'll be great. But I think it's really cool that you've taken it upon yourself to document the surf culture, and just it's a really interesting community. So
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. I interviewed Aquadoc
that's
recently, and not really talking to him, someone who really is an icon in this culture, and for him to sort of commend me for doing this, and he welcomed me into the Great Lakes Surfing Association for what I'm doing, and made me an honorary member and this and that.
right.
So I was just, I mean, some people might not think that means anything, but to me, that was a really big deal. That was really cool to sort of receive his blessing. Yeah. And to know that this is a contribution, and to hear you to have found this on YouTube and it to have had such an impact, to hear people's stories. Now your story is going to be shared. It's sort of showing me how more important this is than I even realized when I started it. When I started it, this was a promotional tool, a way for me to promote the brand I'm trying to create and whatnot. But it very early into doing this podcast, it sort of became about the podcast for me. It's sort of taken on a life of its own, because you're right, it's a living record of history.
Yeah.
Yeah, and which you're a part of, man. And I thank you for being a part of that. And dude, thank you so much, Blake, for coming on the show, for being such a great supporter of the show. And I'm stoked that you're gonna spread the good word out in California, man.
Well, thank you, Derik. I'm stoked that you're stoked, and stay stoked. And I'll keep stoking the stoke flame over here.
Nice, man. You're starting to sound like you're the host of this show. All right. So despite everything you just said to me, I'm going to say to you, dude, Blake Meisinger, stay stoked, bro.
Shoots.